Mr. President, for letting us come.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.
You bet.
News out this morning, unemployment rate up to 9.5%, and it's of course expected to go higher, as you've said that it probably would. What do you tell Americans who are worried that this really will be a jobless recovery, that they may not be able to find jobs even if the economy gets better?
Well, obviously, we are deeply concerned about the employment rate. It's one of the things that I am most focused on when I think about long-term economic policy. We have successfully stabilized the financial markets, and that's important because that was a huge drag that helped precipitate the crisis. We've started to see some stabilization on housing, but what we're still seeing is too many jobs lost, too many families who are worried about whether they're going to be next in terms of job loss or whether they can find another. And what we also know is that even before this crisis, back in 2000 through 2008, when the economy was growing, it wasn't generating enough well-paying jobs to keep pace with a growing population. That's why, even as we deal with these short-term crisis issues, it's so important for us to lay the foundations for long-term economic growth. We've got to figure out what the next growth engine is beyond credit card debt and home equity loans and derivatives on Wall Street. And that's the reason why we've emphasized reforming our healthcare system, which has been a drag on our overall economy, and why clean energy is so important. Because if we're weatherizing every building and home in America, if we are creating windmills and solar panels and biofuel facilities, that is a huge promising area, not only for jobs here in the United States, but also for export growth. And we've got to lift up our exports. So the last piece of this puzzle is also going to be education. We've got to produce more engineers, more scientists. We have to have more innovation. And although it's been more quiet than some of the other reforms we've been talking about on energy and healthcare, our Secretary of Education is really emphasizing how do we lift up performance for all our children so they'll be prepared for the jobs of the 21st century.
Going to Russia this weekend. Why are you meeting with Putin?
Well, I have developed a very good relationship with President Medvedev, and I think that we're going to be able to get some important business done, setting up a framework for a post-START treaty that will bring down the levels of nuclear warheads on both the Russian and the U.S. sides. But Prime Minister Putin still has a lot of sway in Russia, and I think that it's important that even as we move forward with President Medvedev, that Putin understands that the old Cold War approaches to U.S.-Russian relations is outdated, that it's time to move forward in a different direction. I think Medvedev understands that. I think Putin has one foot in the old ways of doing business and one foot in the new, and to the extent that we can provide him and the Russian people a clear sense that the U.S. is not seeking an antagonistic relationship but wants cooperation on nuclear nonproliferation, fighting terrorism, energy issues, that we'll end up having a stronger partner overall in this process.
Do you think sitting down with the Prime Minister can help pull him out of this old way of thinking?
I think meeting with the Prime Minister ensures that he and Medvedev are hearing the same things and seeing the same things so that they can move in concert in cooperating with us on some critical issues.
A lot of experts think that Russia is the real obstacle to confronting North Korea or Iran in an aggressive way, the kind of aggressive way that the U.S. is advocating on the international stage. Do you agree?
I don't, actually. So far, what we've seen is fairly remarkable cooperation from Russia on North Korea. We've seen the same thing from China. I think the sanctions regime after the nuclear tests and the missile launches by North Korea have been robust, in part because Russia and China have been willing to go further than they've been willing to go in the past. In my conversations with President Medvedev, he has acknowledged that Iran's a destabilizing force in the international community, and that he is interested in working with us in trying to find a way that Iran can step away from the brink on this issue. So far at least, we've seen good cooperation on these issues.
But you didn't get military force, for example, to board ships, the North Korean ships, in the sanctions. Wasn't Russia the obstacle?
No, I think that what we saw was the most robust sanctions regime that we've ever seen with respect to North Korea. In international diplomacy, people tend to want to go in stages. And what we're seeing right now is that implementation of the sanctions regime that was set up is going very well.
But you think there's room for more later?
There potentially is room for more later, but keep in mind that what we're also trying to do is to keep a door open for North Korea to start acting in a responsible way, to recognize that a denuclearized Korean peninsula is the only way that they are going to achieve the kind of commercial ties and development opportunities that can be good for their people. And we want them to know that path is still available.
You've talked about wanting to set up a legal framework for prolonged detention, which would be a pretty big sea change in this country's jurisprudence. As a constitutional scholar, expert, does it give you any pause to have, as your legacy, this kind of legalized limbo?
It gives me huge pause, and that's why we're going to proceed very carefully on this front. And it may turn out that after looking at all the dimensions of this, that I don't feel comfortable with the proposals that surface and how to deal with this issue.
What might make you uncomfortable?
Well, as you said, we don't have a tradition of detaining people without trial. The problem that we're confronting here is that there's been a clear distinction in the past between criminals here in the United States and war, which happens in a theater somewhere. We've detained war prisoners during times of war, but the war ended. Here you've got a situation where we have Al-Qaeda and other extremists who would gladly blow up Americans, and yet we don't have a clear terminal point. There's not going to be some surrender ceremony where Emperor Hirohito signs the papers. And given that fact, how to manage extremists who want to do us harm and may not fall neatly under traditional criminal jurisprudence here in the United States or even international laws, but making sure that both the American people are safe and our Constitution is upheld is a very difficult thing. I'm confident that we can do much better than we're doing so far. What we've done in Guantanamo is just leave them there in limbo for 7 years without any recourse. We now know that they have habeas rights, and that means that they are able to answer charges and have legal representation. We're going to be able to prosecute a sizable number of those who are being held in our U.S. courts. The military commissions structure that we are setting up, I think, will meet the demands of our legal traditions. And the question then is going to be, how do we handle folks who we have very strong evidence have engaged in criminal activities or violated laws of war, but the evidence is through multiple hearsay documents that can't be introduced in court, or comes from classified information that we can't compromise in an open situation. How we deal with those situations is going to be one of the biggest challenges of my administration.
If you can't get legislation through Congress to establish some kind of framework, will you do it by executive order?
I am not comfortable with doing something this significant through executive order. I think it is very important that the American people and Congress, in conjunction with my administration, come up with a structure that is not only legitimate in the eyes of our constitutional traditions, but also in the eyes of the international community, because part of our task in defeating these extremists is winning over allies and populations that right now feel as if we haven't been living up to our highest ideals.